Greetings. So, this is a little strange kind of thing for the seasons. It's Christmas Eve. It's blustery and windy outside. 'Tis the season. It's actually quite nice out for a December in southern Minnesota. 45 degrees out. It's almost like the weather was when I was growing up in Oregon. Rainy, cloudy, except for the wind. There wasn't much wind out there. Anyway, this is about symbology and visual language in artwork. Throughout history, much of art. Well, we'll figure that out now. So the whole idea of art itself is a kind of a modern term. Back in the good old days, the Renaissance, where Latin was relatively common among the papacy and the clergy. The term art is derived from a Latin artis. I can't remember exactly what it is, but if you were to translate art through a Latin rooted word, it means skill. So you go to the Renaissance and you say, well, this artist or that artist, well, that doesn't really kind of make any sense. And considering the egos clashing among certain schools of art in the Renaissance, you weren't an artist, you were a sculptor. And if you were a sculptor was better than a painter. And keep in mind, throughout history up until the Renaissance, most of major art pieces were sculpture. There was frescoes and there was mosaics, but for the most part, throughout most of art history up until the early Renaissance, in the early 15th century on up to the late 16th century, that whole huge span of development in different art supplies and different art techniques, for the most part, it was sculpture. And then comes the new technology, painting. And then you had the clash of egos, because Michelangelo would loathe painting and support his sculpture enterprise, whereas sculpture was considered a not archaic, but an old-fashioned, stodgy kind of means of creating artworks. It was mostly relegated to big public works, tombs for the clergy, great big huge structures, because sculptors were also engineers and architects. So in those days, you were a sculptor, you were a painter, you were a draftsman if you did drawing, you were an engraver. And this is also tied in with the fact that most arts were involved with studios that were run by, it was like the studio system with the movies. You had this main artist who had all these employees under them, and one craftsman would stretch canvas, one craftsman would mix paint, one craftsman would size the canvas and put a tint on the canvas, tone the canvas. One craftsman would lay down whatever drawings the main artist wanted. So it got to the point where in some artist studios, the main artist would just do the things that would make that piece of artwork his own, and then he would sign it. Because you would have a painter who would do lace and a painter who would do animals. And it wasn't all of the painters that did this, but there were some major artists in the time period that employed craftsmen in such a way. There were very few independent artists during the Renaissance. Michelangelo was a rarity. Raphael, he was a rarity, and they worked for hire, and they would employ similar craftsmen, but it would be on a job by job basis. Anyway, from that, throughout art history, everything told a story, and that was the part and parcel with symbology. The symbols in a piece of artwork told a story. In portraiture, the skull was usually a symbol of mortality. That was a thing with because portraiture back in the day, prior to photography, was a big deal, and you were telling the story of the person's life and the selective positioning of certain objects in the painting. But that it has something to do with this a little bit. But it's about symbology, telling a story with images. And that's what this is right here. It's telling a story. A strong man using the impending weakness of the human body, which is death. That's what the skull represents. In fleeting time, we're all mortal. But he uses that. And obviously, the jaw muscles being one of the strongest muscles in the body. It's a strong man. The nail does lead to this right here. Because in some ways, when you do something like art or race car driver, there is I wouldn't say it's like yourself crucifying yourself in a way, to borrow religious symbology, but so much as it's an indication of a sacrifice. What does a strong man sacrifice? What does a race car driver sacrifice to be good at what they do? And that's the nail going into the head of the skull, his impending doom, the risk to his life, his impending mortality, and he's holding the hammer. So it's a self-sacrifice. It's similar with this. Another level of it's not so much well, it is sacrifice, but it's not so much martyrdom, in that you have the cross. And I'm not a religious person, but religious icons and religious symbols are useful because they tell a story. They can imply something that other images and other symbols can't. And the cross is pretty universal. And that's one of the other things about art, is its ability to be universal. Say I give you a spiel about what this whole image here talks about, what the symbols mean and all that. And you can come across that and say, well, I see that, but I see something else entirely differently. I see a phallus here. He's holding a hammer. Look where his hand's at. It's covering, like the maple leaves or the fig leaves that they would put on paintings after the Renaissance, on these Renaissance paintings, because of decency. So here's his hand, and here's a hammer, and what's a hammer do? It drives nails in, and there's something potentially perverse with driving a nail into something softer than it. So it's the universal images in art means that not necessarily what the artist intended, but that someone gets something out of the piece of artwork. It's one of the biggest things I have against modern art, is that modern art, well, first off, modern art requires itself to be explained. Like you see a Mark Rothko and you look at it and it's a nice decorative piece, but to get any meaning out of a Mark Rothko, you need to go and read someone's explanation of what a Mark Rothko painting means. And that kind of defeats the purpose of art, because art's supposed to be universal. What I get out of a piece of artwork can be similar to what someone else gets, but that every single person, from a doctor to a truck driver to an engineer to a librarian to a school student, they can come up to a piece of artwork and they say, I get that. Because maybe they select something with the nail and the cross here, or the hammer, or the fact that crosses are driven into the ground here, and the tail end of the cross here is his other leg, and it's driven into the ground. So he's stepping forward, but he can't move forward because he's stuck to the ground. Or he's holding the hammer, and there's the nail there. So he's crucifying himself while trying to move forward. But he's not truly crucifying himself, because where's the other nail? It's kind of a half-assed crucifixion. It's half-hearted. This is one I'm currently working on right now. It's tentatively titled Portrait of a Lie. Obviously, he's lying. Lies are destructive. If not for destruction, the skull could also indicate death, expiration, destruction. And it's got him by the tongue. Remember the phrase, the cat got your tongue? When you're stumbling for words. And obviously the parable of Pinocchio, the extended nose into the cheekbones of the skull. And if you look at it, what's the point of a lie? Apart from the distortions here and here, one face pretty much looks the same. So a lie always is self-evident. So this is just, I wanted to kind of explain a little bit of this, not much. These were started in 2020. Drifting in and out of stacks of paper, stacks of sketches and drawings. This is intended to be a series of blue drawings in ink that will be put in a book with a better explanation than what I'm doing right now. And for the most part, just an art book. Let's see. Like this one right here. So anyway, I just wanted to speak on behalf of these pieces of artwork. Thanks for watching.